Well, good evening everybody and welcome to Ashton Sixth Form College for this Hustings event put on by Quest Media, publishers of the Tameside Reporter, the Glossop Chronicle and of course Tameside Radio 103.6 FM. My name is Michael Taylor, working for Quest tonight on this Hustings. We're going to be hearing from all of the candidates tonight. They've all been given their firm instructions to behave themselves and they've all actually been chatting away and getting on well. We hope, even though this is in many ways a very divisive and by its very nature, it's a general election, it's democracy. It can be a very spiky and contentious and hotly contested election. Nevertheless, we want to try and keep things civil and polite and hope that everybody has the opportunity to make their points heard and hear from the candidates here tonight. Okay? So is everybody geared up for a good night? Do we all agree those ground rules, both the audience and candidates? Great.
Agreed.
Okay. I'm going to be taking audience questions that were submitted in advance, and if we've got time, I will come out into the audience as well and take a couple of additional questions, because I believe we've got some students here from Ashton Sixth Form College who've been set some homework tonight to come up with a killer question as well. I'll go to them about halfway through proceedings if you think there's a topic that's really pertinent to you that's not been covered. How about that? Yeah, great. We're also broadcasting live on Facebook Live. When Quest Media did this last week at the Hustings in High Peak at Glossopdale School, we had thousands of people watching the feed on Facebook Live, literally thousands of people. Maybe that's the way that election campaigns will be conducted in the future, in virtual town halls and community rooms like this one. And there was lots of interaction and lots of comments on the conduct of the candidates. But more than anything, there was a lot of interest in the debate. So we want to throw it open to them. So if we get good questions, if they've not been covered by the ones the audience have submitted and the ones I've got in front of me, then we can go to some questions from Facebook Live. So let's crack on with the questions tonight. I'm going to introduce the candidates. They can introduce themselves by name, and I'd like them to give me a 1.5 minute maximum opening statement about what their pitch is in this general election in the Stalybridge and Hyde constituency. And I'm going to start with Tayub Amjad from the Conservative Party.
Well, hello everybody, I'm Tayub Amjad. I'm the Conservative Party candidate standing in Stalybridge and Hyde. I'm not a politician, I'm a businessman. I've worked all my life setting up businesses throughout the north of England, and some of you may say I was on the wrong side of the Pennines, but I came across to the right side about 10, 12 years ago and set up businesses in Manchester city centre. Now, setting up businesses, I realised the hard work, the grit, the determination it takes. And when I was working on the Leave camp, because I believed in Brexit, I came across those same concerns coming through people that were annoyed at not being listened to and not being heard. And after we got the referendum result, I felt, okay, people's opinions and voices have been heard. And watching the last 3 years of what's been going on in Westminster and Parliament has really been frustrating. So I took it upon myself to, want to stand. I want to stand in a Manchester seat so that I could express the frustrations that people have and hopefully be able to bring about the changes that they want to see in their lives.
Thank you very much. And the next statement from Jamie Dwan from the Liberal Democrats.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming along this evening. I know it's cold and dark and probably not the first thing you want to do on a Wednesday night. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Jamie Dwan. I'm a 20-year-old social science student born and raised in South Manchester. Joined the Lib Dems in 2015, and I'm lucky enough to be one of the youngest candidates across the country in this general election. As a Liberal Democrat, my core values are to ensure that no one is enslaved by poverty, ignorance or conformity, by building a free and fair society based on the values of liberty. And that seems like quite a chunky thing to say, but what it comes down to is, what we're trying to do here is, obviously, you'll probably see a lot about us and Brexit, and that's a very important point for our campaign. But also one thing I want to focus on is the climate emergency. It's a big issue that needs to be faced very quickly. Now, we can't do that if we don't stay in the EU, standing shoulder to shoulder with like-minded nations. If we leave the EU, we will not have the level of influence that we will do now, and that's a really important fact, particularly for places in Greater Manchester. it's such an important aspect, and obviously we don't want to keep hearing about it. I don't want to keep hearing about it. But at the end of the day, there's no such thing as getting Brexit done. We need to stop it and move on. I truly believe any form of Brexit would be bad for the UK, and particularly Stalybridge and Hyde. The impact on our ability to help others is one of the main reasons that I'm standing. You have my word that I am elected. I will do everything I can do to support this area and Greater Manchester, but also to stop Brexit.
Thank you very much. Now, a new party that I'd not come across before, but from the old Gladstonian tradition, which is important to the Greater Manchester area. John Edge from the Liberal Party.
Good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me out there, yeah? Right, okay. This is the first time I've ever stood. I recently joined the Liberal Party. I'm going to lay my cards on the table and be honest about this. I've been a free speech campaigner for about 10 years. I've believed in individual liberty and individual rights pretty much my entire life. The reason I stood this particular year is I was simply sick of having no one to stand for, no one to vote for. You've got to vote for somebody you trust, and it became increasingly apparent that I couldn't really trust anybody, so I stood. So hopefully other people agree that I'm somebody you can trust, somebody you'll vote for. I want to end the divisiveness that's been going on in politics right now. I know that's very easy for me to say, but I've seen a growing rift between people, and part of individuality and individualism is to see people as people and to understand that just because somebody put a different cross on a piece of paper doesn't make them any less of a person. You know, they're not a racist, or they're not a traitor, whatever the other pejoratives people have been throwing about in the papers and in Parliament. At the end of the day, we've got to heal the nation, and we do that by getting Brexit done. We are a pro-Brexit party.
Time's up, John.
Sorry.
That's a good. You'll have lots of opportunities to make those points. Well, your first opening statement in your first election. Well done. We're next going to be hearing from Julian Newton from the Brexit Party.
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate John there. I mean, he's basically said what the problem is with our society. We've got a broken democracy. We're lacking free speech now. And things have got to change. There's not one MP in the Houses of Parliament is qualified to do the job. Not one MP. For one thing, there's not one of them is a commoner, and the House of Commons is for commoners. They've all gone through this gravy train right to the top, and they've now got their snouts firmly planted in the trough. So my name's Julian Newton, and I basically, from the area, born and bred, farmer, engineer, and now a truck driver, because I've had to retool myself to meet the changing situation with our industrial base that's basically disintegrating. And I want my primary objective is to get world peace. As an MP, that must be my prima facie objective, is to get world peace, and around that, get a holistic approach to that. First of all, we need to get out of this EU superstate, which has basically destroyed my engineering career. And the next thing is create a new economy.
Okay, Julian, that's a minute and a half.
Okay.
You'll have plenty of opportunity to answer lots of questions.
Economy.
Thank you.
That's what we can do.
Next we'll be hearing from Jonathan Reynolds, the Labour and Cooperative candidate.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jonathan Reynolds. I am the Labour and Cooperative candidate for the constituency, and I've been our MP for 9 years, and I'm running for re-election. I think this election can be summed up by the fact that when you talk to people out there, so many people no longer believe that the next generation will be better off than they were. You know, that sense of progress, of the country moving forward, has not only stopped, it's for many people gone into reverse. And people want that to be changed. And I agree with them. Real change that will make a difference to their lives. We should not be a country where so many people in work are dependent on food banks to get by, especially in this area. We should not be a country where you go to a city centre and you see tents, villages of homeless people, denied the support that they need. We should be a country where there's a decent system of social care for people in old age. And getting to that and getting past these cuts and austerity that we've had for the last 9 years is at the heart of what the Labour Party is offering and at the heart of what a Labour government would do. On Brexit, there is no doubt that the government have made a severe mess of the last 3 years. But let's be clear. I voted for Article 50 because this constituency voted to leave. But there was no support for David Cameron's deal. I'm running out of Tory Prime Ministers. Theresa May's deal. And then there was no support, slightly more support, but no support in the significant proportion for Boris Johnson's deal. And the reason for that is people have been offered things that they cannot be delivered by the government, and they've got themselves into a huge mess as a result.
Time's
the
up,
only
Mr.
way
Reynolds.
to resolve that is to let people have the information and decide for themselves.
Thank you. And finally, Julie Wood from the Green Party.
Yeah, I'm Julie Wood. I live in Mosley. I work in a mental health charity, and I'm an MSc student. Previously, I've done teaching, research, worked in housing. As a Green, our key aims are to remain in Europe. We would have another referendum, but we would campaign to remain and to transform Europe so that it's more transparent, there's greater democracy. We have got very strong policies, obviously, on the environment, with zero carbon for 2030 and £100,000 a year for new zero carbon homes for social rent. We want to grow democracy with proportional representation, but also with more grassroots representation at all levels and with all issues. We've got the Green Quality of Life Guarantee, which includes the universal basic income, reversing austerity, funding public services, and a new deal for tax and spend.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the candidates. Please show them your appreciation. I'd now like to take the first question from Martin Frost. Martin Frost, the first question.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Chair. In my view, the last three and a half years have been a total and utter abrogation of democracy, and it's led to a loss of faith in politics and politicians. I've been voting for 47 years. I've voted in every single election since then because I believe it is an obligation. What can you offer me? And I put it to all candidates. Give me a reason why I should give my vote to you next Thursday as a representative for Stalybridge and Hyde. Or, as I've been thinking, should I spoil my ballot paper and write none of the above?
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. A very, I think a question that does in many ways reflect a current mood that a lot of us have picked up. And I'm going to give the opportunity to answer that question first to Jonathan Reynolds, who has been the MP for the last 9 years. And then what I'm going to do is take each of you in this order, and then as arranged with Julie, if that's all right. Thank you. Jonathan.
Martin, I understand your frustration. Look, in the last 4 years, we've had 3 general elections, 3 prime ministers. No one can pretend this is normal times or things are going as they should in the normal passage of democracy in the country. But I'd say a few things to you. First of all, when we started the process, under that Article 50 process, there was huge pressure on all MPs. I voted to trigger Article 50. I thought that was the right thing to do following how the constituency had voted. That is now recognised by pretty much everyone to have been a disaster. That pressure we had to trigger it has made the negotiation process for this country much, much harder. And we cannot deny this is one of the biggest decisions, much bigger than a general election, that this country will ever make. And you've also got to look at the reasons people voted the way they did and what they want from that deal. So when you go back to that Theresa May deal, both Leavers and Remainers did not want that deal. It actually offered less sovereignty and less prosperity. There's a little bit more support for Boris Johnson's deal, if I said, but only because people are so annoyed and tired and think, look, I'll take the first thing that comes along that might get us out of it. But that is not the job of an MP, because the decisions that we will make with this will have massive ramifications for many, many years to come. It's not about cliff edges or what happens in a year's time. It's about 20, 30 years into the future, and probably longer. And you need a public representative who takes that duty seriously, who knows what this will be and explains to people what it would be and listens to them. them, because it would be the easiest thing in the world to vote for one of those deals thinking, look, let's just get on with this. But if that's not the right thing, and it will have massive ramifications, and if your MP can't tell you what that means for your job if you work in a factory in manufacturing, or if you work in the service industry, or what it will mean for peace in Northern Ireland, all of those things, we don't know what the impact of those will be if we proceed with Boris Johnson's deal. That's not good enough. So you need someone who'll take that duty seriously in all aspects of the job. That's what I do, and that's what I'll continue to do if I'm re-elected as our MP.
Thank you very much. Julian Newton.
Yeah, please don't spoil your vote. 70 million people died in the last World War to give us the democracy we have today and free us from Nazi tyranny. Okay? It's so important that we're at a change now. I think it's basically similar to the days of 1939, but we've been destroyed politically, not militarily, politically by our own parliament and economically by the European Union, actually. So don't spoil your vote. Vote for me. You've got a choice there. Now, I'm a local guy, I'm an engineer, a farmer and a trucker. I've been at the coalface. I've negotiated contracts all around the world, multi-million-pound contracts. And I know you cannot have a situation where people are left you with a no-deal scenario because of MPs in Parliament voting against a no-deal situation. You've always got to have an exit opportunity in any negotiation, right? If you play poker, that's how you do it. And our MPs are letting us down in a really big way. But it's not just about Brexit here, it's about the hereafter. The Green Revolution is upon us. We have taken oil out of the ground, which has been there for 450 million years plus, and we're releasing into the atmosphere at a rate of 100 years. And that's not going to change the balance in nature, in the climate. You know, you can't just suddenly absorb all that CO2. Something's got to happen. So we've got now to be at the forefront of the next industrial... We created the last industrial revolution. We can be at the forefront of the next industrial revolution. Seriously. Do you know something?
Someone else is turning a second.
Okay, I'll just one big project. I've been trying to reopen the Woodhead line as a zero-emissions railway to take HGVs off the M60 and put them on the M1.
Okay, John Edge from the Liberal Party.
Okay, well, I've got to honestly, again, put my cards on the table here, and I'm probably being a little bit too honest, but there you go. If I wasn't sat here right now, and I wasn't standing for the Liberal Party, I'd probably be doing what you're thinking about doing. I would probably be thinking about spoiling my ballot paper. Because, from my point of view, there is nobody who is representative in this country, certainly in my views. I think that Brexit should go through because democracy, you know. What we do afterwards, we'll find out where the chips lie afterwards, but we certainly need to make that happen. The Liberals are also an anti-austerity party, so we would seek to bring things back, you know, try and help the NHS, try and help all the various other projects that seem to be going on at the moment that people are very important to people. But like I said, one of the most important things that I want to try and achieve is to try and bring people back together. Because all the other parties have been talking about this, but they've only really been talking about it in the last 2 or 3 weeks because the election's on. You know, up till then it's been, oh, these people in such and such a party are such and such a thing, you know. The Conservatives are calling Labour people traitors. Labour are calling other people other things that I probably shouldn't mention over a mic because it might be viewed as, you know, awkward later. But to be honest, that's what I want to do. I want to view people as individuals and I want to hear other individual stories and actually don't see people as a voting bloc, don't see people as just a group of people. I want to see them as, you know, everyone has their own story. Everyone has their own voice, and everybody needs to be understood as an individual rather than a group.
Thank you, John. Jamie Dwan from the Liberal Democrats.
Well, thank you very much for your question. First thing I'll say is, please do vote. even if, you know, you're not voting for me or anyone here, please do vote. This is the first time I've ever voted in a general election. It will be the first time I'll be standing. You know, when you're going to vote, it's not always for what you personally believe, but also other people as well. I have been interested in politics for so long, and when I was growing up, I felt so silenced because I couldn't vote. There are a lot of people who rely on others to vote for them, and a lot of people who might not have a voice to vote for them as well. The last few years have not been normal. You know, politics shouldn't be like this. Politics should be about helping local communities and helping the areas they represent, and it hasn't been like that. Lib Dems, obviously, we speak a lot about Brexit. I want to stop talking about Brexit because I'd like to just be over and let's stop it and get, you know, and carry on as normal. But it's the last 3 years have not been normal, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do is bring people together. And you might say, well, you know, you're trying to bring people together through another divisive referendum. We don't want to have another referendum, but we've looked at the last 3 years, and it's clear that's the only option to get out and get out of this mess. Yeah, so my message would be, please do vote, even if it's not you're not enthused by it. There are other people who really, really would like your vote.
Okay, thank you very much. Tayub, Amjad.
Yeah, so I think it's really important that you do vote. People fought for that, and even though at the moment what's happening with politics it is so frustrating. You vote. We had a referendum. It wasn't about a deal or no deal. It was in or out. The country voted out. Our constituency, 60% of the people voted out. We should have delivered Brexit by now. And I know people are feeling like their voices aren't heard and their opinions are not respected in Westminster because it's career politicians just going through the same thing and not fulfilling the wishes of their constituents and the country. So please, I would say to you, please do vote. Try and find someone that you can vote for. And if you vote for me, I will respect your vote and I will respect your wishes and bring up your issues that you have in Parliament.
Thank you very much to all the candidates so far. Finally, Julie Wood from the Green Party.
Yeah, I should explain that I'm lost by choice because of an invisible disability. So yeah, I would entirely agree that our democracy is in a bit of a state. The way we would tackle it is looking at the powers that corporations have had over decisions that any government can make. We would dial that all back. We would bring an end to austerity, as I've already said, on the grounds that we believe that austerity was a deliberately inflicted pain, which was then exploited to create scapegoats, which is partly what has led to the division and torment that's going on now. That is our position. We would transform democracy by having a political fund which has a level playing field for money for all parties for their campaigns, so that there's an equal amount of money, so that parties who have major backers don't stand a bigger chance over other parties, and also it will bring an end to you know, the power of sort of financial lobbying. Part of democracy is stopping the level of exploitation and extraction from people and from the planet, and give all of these people a voice and a chance to thrive. And in respect of people who don't have a vote, we aim to lower the voting age to 16 and 17-year-olds.
Well, thank you very much indeed for all of the candidates for answering that first of the question. Maybe we could go to Martin and ask him whether, you don't have to come up with a long speech, Martin, but just your indication about how you think the candidates answered that question.
Well, I know I'm going to cast a vote. Yeah, I would never actually spoil it. The ability to vote was hard won. So I will cast a vote, and it will be based not only on a view about national issues, international issues as well, but on who I think will serve the people of Stalybridge and Hyde the best. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad we've been of some use to you tonight. Okay, we're going to take a next question. There's actually two people who've submitted questions very similar to one another. It was Trudy Melvin and Nicola Caudle. You're both here, I believe, as well. Oh, and you're even sat together. Well, you can take turns to answer to put the question to the candidates between you. You can choose. Sinji.
Okay. So the UK government have finally declared that there's a climate emergency. My question is, what specific policies would your party undertake to deal with the climate emergency and ecological breakdown?
Okay, and I'm going to take the first response to that question from Julian Newton.
Hi, yeah, well, our party isn't just about Brexit, we're about the year after. And climate change is the existential threat to mankind. There's no doubt about it. And we have got glaciers melting in the Alps, where Italian villages not so long ago had to be evacuated. If the Greenland ice pack melts, it will raise sea levels by 8 metres. So it's pretty serious stuff, okay? But we never needed to get that oil out of the ground in the first place. Do you know remember the Beverly Hillbillies? Jed Clampett? One day he was out shooting at some food, and out came a bubbling crude, and that's what we've left us with. Okay, we had motors, we had generators, we had battery power, we had turbines. No, but the policy is that we've got to deal with it, and we've got industrial solutions here, which will bring about the next industrial revolution in this country, and it will. For example, we need to electrify the rest of the rail network, 6,832 miles. Problem? British Steel is on its uppers, agreed? Right? That would require between 1.5 and 2 million tonnes of steel. Problem, solution, okay? So I just think, and the Rudder Railway, 0 emissions, I've tried to do that. I've not got any support from my local MP who wants to build a bypass. That's old world. Building bypass is old world. We've got to bring back the railways. They were all closed by Beeching. This one, Woodhead, they wanted to keep it open. He wanted to keep it open. My MP wants to keep it closed.
Okay, I'm sure we'll come back onto that question later in the discussion, Julian. Thank you very much. I'd now like John Edge from the Liberal Party to answer about the measures around a climate emergency.
The green issue is a vital issue, obviously. We need to do more in order to tackle emissions and so forth. What I would say is we're also looking at it on a local level, because you can look at it as an international level, and you see it as an existential threat. You see it as a large looming problem, and what I really would like to look at, more than looking at a massive boulder that's coming down to crush us, tiny individual stones, you know, because you can take things out piece by piece and remove the blockage bit by bit. The other problem with looking at it as an existential crisis is whenever existential crises occur, and this is a side point I admit, but usually it gives rise to people taking advantage out of that. So you will see, you know, higher rates of taxation, further movements towards certain types of political ideology as a result of a green issue. So what we need to do also is completely disconnect the, you know, the environment from political causes in that sense. You know, understand that there is a political solution towards it, but not try and push a political solution through the lens of the green lobby, if that makes sense, if you understand what I'm saying by that. So on a local level, I would look at stopping building on greenbelt land. Okay. I'd look at stop building on floodplains, because that's
you're out of time, I'm afraid. I'm sure we're going to have some questions on housing and greenbelt coming up later on, and I'm now going to invite Jamie Dwan from the Liberal Democrats for his answers on the questions around the climate emergency and responses.
Well, thank you very much for your question. the climate is if not, apart from Brexit, the biggest thing in our manifesto. Absolutely. You know, we've made it front and centre of our campaign. Also, I have to mention, compared to all the other manifestos, our manifesto is the one that has been fully costed, and also has been said by so many independent reviewers that it is the most credible in terms of spending pledges. Look, we're going to hear from Labour and the Tories, they are throwing money out of it. You know, all kinds of money that they can't actually do. You know, we are making climate very important in our campaign, but we're doing it in a credible way. So what is that credible thing? So obviously, first things first, I'm going to bring it back to Brexit. You're going to hear that a lot tonight. 50 billion Remain bonus. If we remain in the European Union, we'll have 50 billion more pounds to spend on so many more things. And one of those things is the climate. We want to ban fracking completely. That's a big thing. Air pollution is another massive thing, in Greater Manchester especially. Some of the levels of air pollution, maybe around the city centre and also on the outskirts, is incredibly high, and that's ridiculous. You also see the GMCA, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, still, and some of the councils still investing money in fossil fuels. That needs to stop as well, absolutely. Why are they using the money from the council tax to then invest in a regressive, fuel? But yeah, as I say, that's our green thing, and it's all costed.
I'd now like to invite Tayub Amjad from the Conservatives on the climate emergency.
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the things that the party is doing is setting up an independent office for the environment, and we've set a target of 2050 being carbon neutral, and looking at things like what I would be doing is protecting our green belt and making sure that we plant more trees and we move away from carbon fuels towards more renewable energy. I mean, if you look from 2010, the amount the government has invested through subsidies in getting more solar panels, I think 2018 was the first year where we've actually produced more electricity from renewable than carbon fuels, and I'd like to see us come off carbon fuels totally, and hopefully that's what our policies will be, and we'll be hoping to achieve that.
Okay, thank you very much. Jonathan Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much for your question, because often this is framed around the target, which is important for carbon neutrality, but actually without any policies, those targets are frankly meaningless. We've got some very specific things that I'm very proud of. We'd have a very big expansion of retrofitting, because energy efficiency in our housing stock is a massive problem, one of the most inefficient housing stocks in Europe, and of course a lot of jobs and other benefits that can be generated that way. We'd expand offshore wind significantly with joint ventures, with the public sector taking a stake if that's needed to make sure we get that expansion. We'd lift the ban on onshore wind, because we should have onshore wind as well as offshore wind. We would see a very big increase in storage capacity and the number of electric charging units up and down the country to make sure transport's being decarbonised. Because let's be honest, we've done the easy stuff so far. Electricity supply is the easy stuff. Transport and heating, especially when it's like this, are much, much harder. One really important thing I want to stress. Under us, we wouldn't just measure the emissions that occur within the UK as a geographic entity. We'd measure the whole emissions that we are responsible for as a society, and that includes imports. Because people have worked out, if you just offshore your industry to try and meet those low carbon targets, look, that's not going to convince everyone. It's counterproductive. Transport is a big part of it too, because people have to change how they live and work. If I could just reply to Julian. Julian wants the government to give him an unlimited financial guarantee for a project, and there is a way you get that, but you don't get it for free. And as a local MP, I've got to tell the truth and be honest about that. But transport, particularly with transport, how you've got to make sure we've got the transport for the people who need it now. We haven't got that at the minute. Every morning we have terrible situations at all of our train stations in the constituency. We've got to repair that, because we need more people using public transport, and we need a regulated bus network. So it's about some specific policies, but also you get into transport and housing and lots of other things too, but that's what we want to do.
Thank you. And I think on Question of Sport, they used to call this a home question, for those of you that would watch that. Julie Wood from the Green Party.
Yes, we initiated councils declaring climate emergencies in Bristol. That was the first city council to do so. So as you can imagine, we've got a whole raft of very strong specific policies for climate. A few of them are that we would accelerate the transformation of our energy supply. We would pave the way for wind to provide around 70% of the UK's electricity by 2030. We would change the planning system so that it supports a massive increase in wind power and other renewable generations. We'd remove subsidies to oil and gas industries. We'd have a carbon tax on fossil fuels. We would connect our electricity supplies to our neighbours. So, for example, undersea supplies to Norway and Iceland and their geothermal. We would encourage energy efficiency across the economy and build business use. For us, it's not simply an add-on or a lobby. It is politics, and it goes through the heart of absolutely everything. Everything will be transformed for the benefit of the climate, because otherwise then there's nothing else. In terms of transport, yes, we want to improve increase electrification of cars, better railways, renationalise the railways. Our MPs put a renationalisation bid in. We would have a deeper retrofitting programme for existing homes, and we build 1 million new council homes a year, which would have 90% energy, better energy use than they do at the moment.
Okay, Julian, I'm going to call time on this one. I know it was an important question for you to answer, but how about going back to...
Can I just make a point there? There is actually electric cable between this country and the European mainland. You do know that, don't you?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so just correct me on that one.
Okay, should we go to Nicola and Trudy and see if you have a response to any of the candidates and any of the points that they made, or...
Just generally that it's going to be more important than Brexit, it's going to be more important than everything else that we get this sorted and we focus on it and that we do something very, very quickly. So thank you for your answers.
2050 is far too late. Conservative candidate.
Okay.
Can I just make a point there as well?
No, you can't.
Can you? 2050.
No, please, come on. We've got a lot of business to get through. We've only got an hour, and we've got the next question, which I'll be taking from Andrew Richardson. Andrew, which is there.
Good evening, candidates. As you heard, my name's Andy Richardson. I'm founder and head of the admin team on Hyde Past and Present, which is Hyde's largest Facebook group with 22,000 members. So we get to see a lot of the issues that affect the constituents in the area you want to represent. So could you answer me, how do you feel you are qualified to actually represent those constituents, bearing in mind that you'll be representing them for 5 years, not just on Brexit, not just on climate change, but on issues that affect them in the constituency?
Okay, if I could just frame your question, what I think you're asking is how they would conduct themselves as a constituency MP dealing with casework and the different issues that may arise from time to time that maybe even unexpected. Why they're qualified to do that sort of work. Okay, I'm going to start on this one with John Edge from the Liberal Party.
As I stated before, one of the key Liberal principles is to see people as individuals, to understand that everybody's got their own individual story. I'm not sure by the nature of the question whether you're asking whether I have credentials in terms of work or credentials in terms of anything along those lines, but I've worked as a salesman, I've worked as a doorman, I've put on events, I've done a great many different things that have meant that I've met a great many different people and spoke to all strata of the community. I understand, well, I hope I understand people on a very kind of basic level a lot of the time. I'm able to really, I think, get to the heart of people's problems, and I'm not bound by any kind of doctrine other than liberalism, which is a fairly freeing doctrine, so I wouldn't have to say to somebody, well, I can't do that because I've got to stick to party lines or my hands are tied. I will ask a difficult question if it needs asked. I will pursue something to the ends of the earth if it needs pursuing. I am basically like a dog with a bone when something is necessary to be talked about, and I certainly would not stop if someone told me to stop, you know what I mean? And I wouldn't regard my party as something where somebody would say, you can't say that or you can't do that, stop that. You can't ask that question.
Great. Thanks very much, John. Jamie, from the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you for your question, Andrew. So, yeah, a lot of things that happen when, particularly when you're a young candidate, is a lot of people say, well, you don't have enough life experience. And in some ways, that could be true, but there is a certain element in this election that young people are not represented, and particularly, young people in a lot of constituencies. 20% of the constituency's population are 18 to 35. And I can't point to many MPs that are young enough to represent what people actually think. They may be young in terms of an MP, but, I want to, if I were elected, I want to represent people, young people particularly, who haven't had a voice, who haven't had someone like them in Parliament, and that's something that's really important. In terms of anything else, one of the most important things I think in our democracy, and it's brilliant about our democracy, is the constituency link. I think it's brilliant. There is not many other countries where you see such high up politicians like prime ministers who have to then go back to their area and speak to what their constituents think, and that's brilliant, and I think that's really, really important. It's important that people are held accountable, and also it's important that they come back to their constituencies and remember the fact that it doesn't matter what they do in Westminster as well, they've still got to come every 5 years to this area, and this area have got to say if that's good enough or not, and I think that's really important. So one of the really important things that I want to stress is casework and actually serving people and being people's voice. That's how you spread your message, and that's how you serve people well.
Okay, Tayub Amjad.
Yeah, so as I said before, my background is I'm a businessman, and in that I've had to get up in the morning not knowing, how my business is going to do, if I'm going to do well, and that has taught me a lot about negotiating, bringing people together, getting through hard times and, good times, but making sure I'm there every day and listening to concerns and making sure that issues that are brought up are being delivered. And that it's, you have politicians who come back every 5 years to ask for your vote. I'm not a politician. I want to get things done for you. So I will come back, I'll listen to what the issues are, and I'll go, and because I'm a businessman, I come up with solutions to problems, and that's what I'll be looking for. How can I solve the problems of Stalybridge and Hyde? How can I bring more investment into the town centres? How can I get better transportation? If I need to go to the Transport Secretary and get them to put more money into Manchester, more money into Stalybridge and Hyde, that's what I'll be doing. I've never done casework because I'm not a politician, but I think I'll be quite good at it because I know how to get things done.
Okay, Jonathan Reynolds, what qualifies you to look after the constituents of Stalybridge and Hyde?
Well, Andrew, to understand this constituency, you've got to understand that it's not just Stalybridge and Hyde. And I don't just mean the 5 towns that can't all make the title of the constituency. You've got to know your top Mosley from your bottom Mosley. You've got to know that G-Cross is different to Godley, and that's different to Newton. And you've got to get yourself around all bits of that. We're a very varied constituency. A lot of people don't appreciate that, just how much, we've got 100 farmers in the constituency, and people don't always see that diversity, but that's what we're about. And I get myself around every single bit of it. I don't just knock on doors. At election time, we do it every fortnight, and that's tough at times, especially when politics is quite volatile, but it's part of the job in listening to people and taking that work back to Parliament. And that's why the things that I raise in Parliament, when I'm bobbing up and down, are the things that people have raised with me. And it's also why I'm very proud of the job I do for people. I get thousands of emails and letters every week. We've been able to win thousands of pounds back from people who've had very difficult times, especially with the Department of Work and Pensions. That's what I mean. It's about getting back to people. I have a Facebook page, an Instagram account, a Twitter account. People very much, even through all this stuff around Brexit, the thing that people say to me all the time is, we really appreciate every time there's a big night in Parliament, you're there with your live videos, telling us what's going on, telling us what each vote means. And that's part of the job now, and it's a very big and important job for me. I also don't come back every 5 years, I come back home every weekend. And I'm active in the community, and I'm taking part in things. That's why I often see you out and about through the Facebook page as well. And that's the job. That's not just being in Parliament, it's about what you take from this area back to Parliament. I've done that for 9 years. I've been able to enjoy a very substantial increase in the number of people who vote for me over that time. And I think it's in reflection to that dedication and work for people that I've had that kind of success. And I want to continue doing that job for people locally.
Thank you. Julian Newton from the Brexit Party.
Well, I disagree in that because I know all the farmers in this valley and he's not seen one of them. So that's one thing I wanted to correct him on, okay? And he's not taken into account any of the issues with the farming community at all. So I think I'm the most qualified of us all, to be honest. I've been at the coal face. You know, seriously, I mean, you can laugh. But, you know, I have been at the coal face. I'm an engineer. I've suffered from depression following the closure of Merleys Blackstone and the rest of the engine businesses in the UK, following the takeover of a German company, MAN. That doesn't mean I don't like Europeans. I've got some great friends in Europe, but what I can't abide is the European superstate. I cannot abide it. But yeah, I've been at the coal face, and I've negotiated contracts all around the world, and now I'm a truck driver. So I've travelled up and down the country. I've seen what's happening to our economy. We've gone from 1 trillion when these guys left power to 1.8 trillion in 8 years. And do you know why? Because we have a £100 billion trade deficit. It's like a leaking bucket. And we're filling it up with our debt. And that needs to be sorted. And we need to go back to making things like this climate change. It's a great opportunity for British companies to now get behind that and open up our railways, get new transport. We can build super eco ships. The technology is there to have low...
Okay, thanks, Julian. It's now time for Julie Wood from the Green Party.
Well, personally, I would be committed to doing casework. I've got considerable experience of that, not as a politician, but as a worker for a number of charities where that's been a large part of the work, and working in housing, which has often involved going up against authorities or official bodies. And so I believe I'm very skilled at doing that. I would be very supported by my party in that, because were we to enter Parliament, we have 10 bills which we would campaign to get through, and many of them focus on giving more power to local areas, focusing money on smaller areas, smaller groups of people working together. And so it's part of our whole essence to give more strength to people in their own locality, rather than this sense of being forced to do something by the state, by a bigger authority. So obviously the two will be linked, but we have stronger channels for local concerns. So there's my own personal skills, and of course we very, very much promote casework and supporting individuals, but also supporting those local communities in a way in which has not been known before in this country.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie. Andrew, could we go back to you? How did you think the candidates answered that question? And what qualities did you think you would be looking for?
Well, I'd actually be looking for a candidate that actually represented everybody in the community. And like I said at the beginning of the question, and you know, it's not just about Brexit, it's not just about climate change, it's about representing people for 5 years and all different sectors of your constituency. So obviously it was interesting, like Julian talking about Brexit, when I said, you know, what besides Brexit would you do? And sorry, I don't know, Tayub, is that, yeah, was saying about representing the business community through his business expertise, but I think it's about representing everybody not just those particular things.
Great. Emma, could you get the microphone to our young students here? Introduce yourselves, lads. I guess you're students here at Ashton Sixth Form College. Great. What are you studying?
I'm studying IT, politics and history. As a young person who's in the first year of A-level, I've just passed my GCSEs and I'm just about to finish a 2-year term as Tameside Member of Youth Parliament. So I understand the stresses of going through the education system at our age and the GCSE system. What are your party's plans to change the education system to make it more accessible and better for the young people of the country?
Young people specifically in this area as well?
Young people in this area and everybody who is about to take their GCSEs in the future.
Okay, thank you. As luck would have it, the first person to answer this question is also the youngest member of our candidate panel.
Well, thank you for the questions. Absolutely, as I keep saying, one of the most important issues is that young people are represented. Now, it might be scary for this panel, but I did my GCSEs probably about 3-4 years ago. They don't work as how they are at the moment, and the only change we've had is the change from the grading system, and that also doesn't work. The exams, particularly, don't suit everyone. They didn't suit me. I did a BTEC in sixth form, and it was great. It was absolutely fantastic. I learned so much more. And that's one of the most really important things is it's not just, I don't think our education system should be based on exams. You know, the vocational work is really, really important. You know, vocational learning is really important. Not everybody wants to go to university, for example. Not everybody wants to, you know, do these set subjects. So I think that's a really important point is let's look at the education system and look at what actually people learn from, what actually people are engaged in. And I don't think people are engaged with learning and remembering a load of things and then going into a room and trying to spill it on a piece of paper. That doesn't work. And I think a lot of people, you know, because I haven't done it for a while, the GCSE system needs to be changed, but also introduce higher levels of vocational work, more more work on that isn't examinated, because, and also for people with special needs as well. That doesn't work for people, and that's why it's really important that we bring in more vocational work and less exams.
Okay, thank you very much. Tayub?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm quite passionate about is actually education. I've worked in disadvantaged areas with some kids in schools there, and what I believe is that actually, you know, academics is a really good thing, and we should be having those, but we should also be teaching you know, vocational things and giving children life skills, you know, and that could involve things like how to grow your own food, how to make your own food and cook. I'm a passionate believer that it's not just academic education, and we, under the Labour government with Tony Blair, we had this big push to get everyone into universities, and it's not the way I think it should be going. A lot of people were leaving universities, and you know, employers were complaining that the people weren't coming out that were ready for employment, and I think that needs to be taught as well. You know, to students at a younger age, so they're ready for the workforce. And I also believe there should be lessons in community service, so people understand their local community and they're out there working there. So it can make them better citizens for the local area and the country.
Jonathan, you have many children. What's the what's your answer to the young people here on
I know how many
education?
I have, which is maybe a difference to some of the candidates nationally running in the election. First of all, I have to say that there's been so much change in the education system over the last decade. You're almost reluctant to propose any more. I mean, I struggle with particularly the grades becoming numbers, which seemed to sort of only Michael Gove was convinced, but he could do that. He had the power. I think fundamentally what we want is a much more lifelong system of education that gives people opportunities and supports them throughout their lives. Obviously that's important when they're young, but actually adult education in this country is very important too, and too many people are turned off education early on, I think. And to answer the sort of specific thrust of your question, we think the inspection regime for schools needs to change. We think it has to be much more about trying to support schools, give them the best practice. It shouldn't be the case that in some schools up and down the country, the inspection regime is effectively about should the head teacher be sacked and simply replaced with someone else. You know, will they get lucky this time? You've got to have a much more holistic and supportive environment than that. We think there's too much testing early on as well, and we'd like to see some of that change and replaced with teacher assessment. It wouldn't have to be any less rigorous, but a lot of teachers point out that the way that we are doing some of these things at the minute isn't working very well. They themselves are very burnt out. Teachers leaving the teaching profession is now one of the major challenges for education. But I just want to say one more thing as well, because one thing that's really changed since I think the end of the last Labour government to now is many of the things we need in schools in this area to improve education are no longer really just about education. They're actually about the lack of, you know, support for mental health services in the health service. They're about funding shortages in things like social care, where schools can't access the additional support that they need. And I think rather than just lecture teachers to somehow do better, we've got to acknowledge that we're letting them down with the overall support that they are getting. When they're asking for additional resources, they're not getting it. We've got to look at that too.
Okay, thank you, Julian Newton.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the education system needs a complete overhaul, to be honest. I was educated at Londondale High School, and then my children, all three of them, have all been educated there. and I can honestly hand on heart say it wasn't the greatest education they could have had. But, and a lot of it's because I think we've lost our way, really, you know. It's so important that we're educated, but this thing here, this is an appendage to the brain, okay? When you want to know something, you just go to this phone here. So there's got to be a substantial change in the way we educate our kids. Maybe we've got to go toward mentoring them, because the information they'll need in the future is there at a touch of a button. I've talked about climate change and about we're at the forefront of a next industrial revolution. Now, if we can basically go with that, we will need engineers to build that railway, if you can get approval from Johnny here. Build that railway, right? Electrify the railways, make it a green engineering UK PLC, if you like, you know, and we will need engineers. Let's bring back apprentices, apprenticeships, because not everybody wants to go into further education. You know, some kids, when they're at primary school, they have a leaning towards woodwork or something like that. Well, there's no metalwork department in high school anymore. There's no woodwork department.
Okay.
There's no sports department, hardly. There's no sports team. Sport is so important for mental health. Just let me finish 1 second.
No. You've had your time. You've had your minute and a half. What, you got a minute and a half, John Edge?
The problem with coming this far down in the order is most people have already stolen my thunder. So I do agree with quite a lot of people. One of the things that I think is vitally important is that we start to value education more as a society. Because one of the problems is that we seem not to quite enough a lot of the time. You know, I've got several friends who are teachers. I'm married to a teacher. I hope she doesn't mind me telling people that. But quite often in social situations, she feels uncomfortable about telling people she's a teacher. I don't think that's a very good state of affairs. I don't think that's very good for a teacher's mental health that they feel like that. And happy teachers produce happy students. It's as simple as that, you know. The other thing I would say, if I've got a few seconds over,
50 seconds.
Is from a liberal standpoint, I think it's more important to teach people to think, to not necessarily, for want of a better word, indoctrinate them into a way of thinking. You teach them how to think, and you teach them critical thinking, and you show them that there's more than one viewpoint, because I think the problem with where we find ourselves is quite a lot of people do not see the other viewpoint, as I said before.
Okay.
And I think that's one thing we need to do moving forward, work on critical thinking more than a lot of other things.
Thank you very much. Julie, from the Green Party.
Our principle for education is to build an education system which is lifelong, liberating and accessible to all. We want education, as it should be, to unlock creativity and enable self-expression across all ages. And we've got plenty of policies to bring that about. We would relieve the financial squeeze on schools. We would focus funding to reduce class sizes to under 20. We would free schools from central inspecting regimes such as Ofsted. We would revive the further education sector to provide academic and vocational learning, raising the funding rate for 16 to 17-year-olds, followed by an annual rise with inflation. We would restore arts, music and sports, and probably woodwork too, to all state schools, so that all children can develop their creative potential. We believe that at all ages, people have the possibility of changing and developing in different ways. So we wouldn't be wanting to primarily see education as a kind of rehearsal room for specific job roles, although our education system would be tied in to all the green new jobs which will be provided. We will
Thank you, Julie. Thank you. I'm going to ask the candidates to sum up with their closing statements in a few minutes. We've almost reached 8 o'clock. We haven't got the time for so many of the questions that have been sent in, and I'm really grateful for you for doing so. I think all of you will appreciate some of the questions that we haven't been able to cover, problems around universal credit, funding and research into cancer. That was one of the questions that came up. There's questions around the economy, and particularly one of the parties' spending pledges in their manifesto has come up in a question. But I'm just going to ask the young people, how do you think they did on your feelings on education?
Personally, I agree more with the right side of the room. That's just me, but I'm 17, but I can't vote anyway.
Right, shut up then. Come on, we've got to get on with the rest of the night.
So, personally, all of you have made very good points about education, about how we do need to reform it. Last year, obviously, I took my GCSEs as well. Some exams, I found them much harder than others. I would say certain areas in education, science and English, perhaps do need reforming, whereas other subjects that I definitely did much better in, I do think are as well prioritised, such as history and geography and business studies, one of the subjects which I really enjoyed. I think these subjects need to be promoted more in primary and secondary education.
Okay. Fantastic. Great, thanks for your points, guys, and appreciate you coming along to the event tonight, and hopefully you'll get to cast a vote in a general election next year then, presumably, at the current rate. Okay, I'm going to ask each of the candidates to sum up, and I'm going to go in the opposite order from which we started, but again, once again, Julie, in deference to your request, you can finish. I'm going to start with you, Jonathan Reynolds.
Well, thank you everyone for coming
by the way, a minute.
Tonight, and thank you for your questions. I hope people have taken two things from this evening. First of all, that there is a lot at stake at this election, and second of all, that there is a big difference between the candidates. I fundamentally think this country's been on the wrong path for the last 9 years, and that has been extremely hard for people around here. I want to give them hope, and I want to give them some real prospects for change in future. Only the Labour manifesto does that. It ends austerity. It says we can meet the climate emergency. It means we can get proper investment in northern transport and all the things we know around here that we need. The only person who can fulfil that manifesto is me, the Labour candidate, so I'm asking people to re-elect me as the Member of Parliament for Stalybridge and Hyde at this general election.
Thank you very much. Okay, Julian Newton.
Okay, I think you know what I'm about. I want to bring back industry. I think we've got a great opportunity with the Green Revolution. There's lots of great projects out there now to basically revitalise our economy and make us more self-sufficient. We need to get out of Europe. That's done. If we go now capping onto Barnier and the other people there, they will just treat us like dirt, even more so than they've been doing up to now. And essentially, you know, I'm a local guy. I've lived amongst us all. I love the place. I love the scenery. I love the countryside. And I think I can do a great job for you. I really do. And I can't wait to get involved and get my hands dirty, basically, and get on with those great projects, because that's what I'll be doing day one, because we've got to bring back engineering and manufacturing to this economy. It's got to be done, or else we're going to be in the slow lane for the rest of our lives. And the lives of our generations ahead of us.
Thank you very much. John Edge.
Yeah, okay, well, what I would say to everybody is that the Liberal Party is a true alternative for people that are looking for something to be an alternative. We're a Green party, we're anti-austerity, and we're pro-Brexit. Now, that sets us apart to pretty much everybody on the ballot paper, one way or another. I think that austerity, by and large, was ideological rather than necessary a lot of the time. We would also like to bring in, perhaps with more consultation, the idea of a regional assembly for nearly everywhere. So you bring in a more localised government to certain areas, and that, I think, would liberalise politics a great deal more. If you had the people's access directly to the levers of power rather than us being miles away, because I've lived in the north all my life.
Well, and John, you've done your first summing up as a candidate.
Right,
Fantastic.
there we go.
Give me a round of applause. Okay, Jamie.
Well, thank you very much for coming tonight, everybody, and it's been a really interesting debate. It's nice to have a nice debate. It's good to hear from everybody. So you've heard what I'm offering in this election. Some more things I'll do is I'll put a penny on income tax to fund our NHS and social care. I will put the interests of Greater Manchester at the front of everything I do. One of the questions not come up tonight is about crime, and I think that's a really important issue around here, and especially Greater Manchester, is I want to fight crime in a more community-based way. I think the way you fight crime is you go to the root of the problem, and then you go from there. Another thing I want to talk about is our education policy, and I think one of the things I didn't mention before is one of the things that Lib Dems want to do is abolish Ofsted, and if there's any teachers in the room, so you understand it's not fit for purpose. It's not an institution that is working for communities. This election next week is about Brexit, because Brexit underpins everything, but it's not just about that. If by voting Lib Dem, you're not just sending a message about Brexit, but also the two tired old parties aren't working for you anymore. Okay. There is another choice.
Right, okay, thank you. Tayub.
Well, thank you very much for coming and listening to us all tonight. What I would like to say is, for too long in this constituency and across the north of England, the Labour Party has taken your vote for granted. This is a real opportunity for change. We can vote Conservative and get Brexit done, which will build a stronger economy, which makes us invest in our NHS, bring more police onto our streets, introduce tougher laws for criminals, and when they get locked up, they serve those sentences. Let's invest in our education. This vote on the 12th of December is one of the most important elections of a generation. You've been neglected and your voices have not been heard. Give us an opportunity to be able to bring those changes and unleash the potential of Great Britain.
Okay, thank you, Tayub. Julie, from the Green Party.
Vote Green for the party which will act fast, strong and deep on the climate change, to a party which will seek to keep our protections from Europe and develop them. We will introduce the universal basic income, thus alleviating poverty across the board. We support Crossrail. We want to reform land tax and protect the green belt, stop people banking land, that's buying land and sitting on it, develop a green industry, and transform transport so that economic growth isn't only in the major cities, but in areas like ours. Vote Green.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much to all of the candidates and to all of you in the audience and to all of you watching at home on Facebook Live or on a train journeys if you're stuck in a tunnel somewhere. It's been a real pleasure to host this. It's an important part of our democracy, I think. And hopefully, those of you who are interested, those of you who have friends and neighbours, please come and join us at Hustings next Tuesday at Curzon Ashton Football Club, where we'll be hosting the Ashton-under-Lyne constituency Hustings, and we have got an agreement that Angela Rayner will be coming to that one. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that for the Denton and Reddish constituency. They had their one Hustings last night, and the candidate wasn't available. And you can read all about it, of course, in the Tameside Reporter. So thank you very much once again to all of the candidates. Please show them your appreciation.